Good evening, Vancouver. Welcome back. It's Canucks After Dark. It's an emergency edition on a Friday, January 31st, where the Canucks not only traded JT Miller away, but as I found out 3 minutes ago, because I wasn't paying attention, the Canucks have also traded away most of what they got for JT Miller for more pieces. So we've got an absolute boatload of things to go over tonight. But as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Canuck Clay. How are we doing today, Clay?
What a day. What a day to end off this first month of the year, Parker. And I know we joked around. We always joke around and say, hey, be ready for an emergency show. So at 4 p.m., I did my emergency show without even checking with my partner, ParkersPucks. And then ParkersPucks was so good, said, Clay, you do your show. It's fine. And I said, okay, Parker, I'm going to bring you on. And we thought, and we had a great 45-minute chat, and we thought that would be the bulk of what we're going to be talking about tonight, because we planned for a 10 p.m. show. And sure enough, I'm stuffing my face at dinner. You're stuffing your face at dinner. And we come home to get ready for our show. And we got a second trade to talk about.
Yeah, it's funny. So I went out for dinner. We had a 6:30 reservation for a birthday, which was great. We were there till like 9, but I had to leave after the first commercial break in the second period. So like 6 minutes into the second. So I record the rest of the game, get home, and I'm like, hey, I've got 36 minutes or 34 minutes of hockey left, and I've got 50 minutes until the show. Perfect. I can skip commercials and we're rolling. So I do all that. Game ends. Canucks lose, but I think they played a pretty solid game, all things considered. And then I get down here and I get everything set up, and I'm like texting my friend, and one of them's like, yeah, we got 3 Petterssons down. I'm like, what are they talking about? Like they're confused about something. And then I look and I open NHL.com. This is like, I got everything pulled up on the Miller trade. I open up NHL.com to get stats from tonight's game against Dallas. And I see this headline, Pettersson and O'Connor traded to Canucks by the Penguins, published at 9:51 p.m. And I'm just confused. And so now you guys actually get my live reaction. I've done no research into this, but we'll do it all live.
Do it live.
I'm pretty excited because I like Marcus Pettersson a lot. But we got 2 big trades to break down. Essentially, what ends up being 5 pieces out for the Canucks, and 5 pieces in, but then 1 getting moved. So 4 pieces in. It's a ton of overhaul for this Canucks team that, like, for their next game is going to look a lot different than they did tonight. And frankly, than they did 2 days ago.
The net result, exactly, is 4 guys that we've seen play in this lineup this year gone: Miller, Heinen, Desharnais, and Brandstrom. And then 3 guys that we'll probably see in the lineup within the next week: Chytil, Pettersson, and O'Connor. You know, Mancini will probably start in Abbotsford, just as Jackson Dorrington, Melvin Frenstrom are still. But and then the first round pick, it's a wash, right? The one that we got is out. So technically, we end the day the same way we started, right, Parker, with that first round pick, is we didn't have it. Basically.
Yeah.
So wow.
And I think 5. During your show that we were, or your stream that we were on earlier, I think we said, that we probably don't ever see what that first round pick ends up being. And it took a few hours and it's gone. Which is crazy. It's crazy how quick they brought that in. They got rid of it. And we've got, we can really skip the game for the most part, right? Maybe we take 30 seconds right now and we talk about the Canucks game that was on today. And then we spend the next 50 minutes talking about these trades. Give me your synopsis of tonight's Canucks game.
Okay. Let's be realistic. So 1 or 2 minutes on the game, but I hear what you're saying. Then we'll acknowledge a couple of the super chats. So thank you, everyone. And then we'll get to. So super chats, thank you. We'll get to you in membership messages in a second. Okay. I watched the first 2 games at work on my phone while I was waiting for my lovely wife Gail to pick me up, because we had a big family dinner tonight downtown. Kobe Steakhouse, my favorite, while I'm getting all these trade alerts. And I tweeted what I saw, and I said, despite them losing, I saw a team that seemed connected. They seemed focused. They seemed motivated. And I know it's just on my phone, but I actually heard them talking, like, even more. I'm not saying Miller made them not talk. I'm not saying that at all, but they seemed energized. They seemed like they wanted to win, to prove they could win without Miller. They wanted to extend their 3-game, finish off with a sweep, all those things. So I actually thought despite the 5-3, remember 2 empty netters. It's weird to see a 2-goal win with 2 empty netters. That's because we canned one with 4 seconds left. I thought overall, playing against a pretty good Dallas team, one that's fighting for, second spot in the Central, I thought the Canucks were okay. I thought they were good.
Man, you keep blowing my mind. I didn't know we scored with 4 seconds left. I turned it off when there was 11 left. Man, I'm doing great. Danton Heinen, last point as a Canuck with 4 seconds left in that game.
Hey man, it's a rough day for all of us. Don't worry. So I thought they were fine. To answer your question, I thought they were fine.
Yeah, like I was saying,
What'd you think?
6:30 reservation. Missed the last period and a half of the Canucks game, but watched it all when I got home and stayed off social media. So I missed a lot of the trade stuff, but obviously catching up on it now. Frankly, this Canucks game, and I was thinking it from the first 26 minutes that I watched, and I was thinking it for the last 34. Canucks were the better team tonight. Like, this was a game where the Canucks had a playoff vibe to their team. Elias Pettersson played really, really well. He made some nice moves, some good moves in the neutral zone. He genuinely looked really good. Niels Höglander draws 2 penalties purely out of effort. Connor Garland was fantastic. Demko lets in a shaky 1 or 2. But like, they're just like really good high percentage plays that they score on, and you can't blame him too much for those. And Jake Ottinger was fantastic. So overall, like, I hate getting into moral victories 50 games into the season or whatever we're at right now, where this team needs every point possible to get into the playoffs. But when the chips were down and they just got rid of their number 2 seed at 100 points last year, they played a really good hockey game. And I'm not going to get too upset about that loss, because frankly, the team is so much different going into next game, because obviously they trade away JT Miller, so they're missing him, and Filip Chytil hasn't made it to the team yet. So that's boom. You're getting another center for next game. Now, Heinen and Desharnais out, Pettersson and O'Connor in. We'll talk about all that, but there's a lot of, for a team that has frankly underperformed all year and is on the playoff bubble, and various analytic metrics have them at, the Athletic had them at 79%, dropping to 71 after the Miller trade. But places like Money Puck having them around 50%, things like that. There's a bit to be optimistic about, and I'm excited to dive into all of the trades, what we think the depth chart's going to look like, and how this team compares to what they looked like, frankly, 2 days ago.
Yeah. No, all good points. And I think another thing that we got to talk about is, or you kind of said it, because we lose Miller so that's obviously a huge part of our team that wasn't playing tonight. Yet we don't have any of our new guys left. And remember, at game time is only the first trade, obviously, because Heinen kind of played in this game. So you don't have Chytil playing. So you're basically down your best forward, or arguably your best forward, right? So I agree. When you look at the big context of this game, we won 3 straight. We lose to a team that's supposed to be better than us, playing at home, end of a road trip. I'm sure there's a lot of emotional, just turmoil within all of these players. Maybe some are relieved, maybe some are sad, but all not making excuses for this team, because we give them their flowers when they win. And tonight they played okay. Like, it's not like they got ran out of the building. And so I can't wait. I'm going to this Red Wings game on Sunday. I want to see some new guys in our lineup. Maybe I'll get to see Pettersson and Chytil already. So and maybe O'Connor even with Sherwood out. So we'll see. Yeah.
The only risk is like visa issues. Sometimes I always get iffy with moving to Canadian teams, but hopefully they get all that worked out. Let's jump to the super chats real quick. Thank you all for joining, and thank you for those super chats. Starting with Spartan, about 7 minutes ago. Sign Emil Pettersson, Fred Emil Pettersson, and Frederick Pettersson. If we do just have a team of Petterssons, maybe that's the perfect combo. But thank you very much for the 5. Fangirl says someone buy a Team Sweden jersey and put DPD, PD, and Marcus on the 3 crowns on the jersey. That would make every article. That'd be fantastic.
I heard they're calling him 3 PD now. Marcus Pettersson is 3 PD now.
Yes, Trey PD as they call it.
There you go.
As they call it.
Very good.
Knuckleback, who I saw mention, this is his first Canucks After Dark stream. Thank you for joining. FYI, LA has a Jack Hughes in their prospect pool. Perfect. That's not going to cause any confusion. And Harry says, hi, Parker and Clay. How are you guys? You're surprised that Danton Heinen was playing tonight and gets traded after. Frankly, I'm not super surprised. He's not a super high leverage piece. But maybe a piece that derails the trade if he were to get hurt. But again, not the most important piece of that trade with that first round pick that was involved.
No, that's correct. And unlike Miller, where you're protecting the asset, they were working on this trade, it sounds like, while the game was going on. So you had no way of anticipating. Like that's even worse, right? If you say, hey, Dan Heinen and Vincent, well, Darnay wasn't playing anyways. Heinen, you're not playing tonight. And then if it doesn't go through, then that looks horrible. So it makes sense. And it's great that Heinen did end off his brief career with the Canucks with a point at the very end. What a day party. Like Sakaris or someone said that this is the biggest facelift to the Canucks team in one day since the Pat Quinn days when he was making massive trades. I don't even know if you were born yet, in the mid-90s kind of thing.
I mean, maybe a couple July 1sts, right? Like, like the Louis Eriksson July 1st was I think from a franchise defining perspective, probably similar to like the disaster of the OEL trade. But hopefully for the better. So yeah, we had the opportunity to catch up earlier today. So it was funny when you at like 4:40, you asked if I could stick around for another 20. And in my head, I'm thinking, I don't want to get everything out there if we're going to do a show tonight, right? I don't want to be repeating myself a ton. But turns out it wouldn't have mattered because there's a whole other trade that involved a first round pick and a pretty good defenseman and a bunch of other stuff. There is so much for us to go over that I think we have to sort of go chronologically, step by step, and then at the very end, we can do the big picture, whole scale analysis of what went out, what came in, and what does that mean for this team going forward? Did the Canucks get better today? Did they get worse today? Both short term and long term, because they're both important things to consider.
Parker, I love that plan. I was just saying, I love that plan. That's good.
I was just gonna say, before we dive into it, anything you want to say?
Well, just that I love that plan because I think it makes the most sense. We look at each trade and the pieces individually. Then we look at, did the Canucks get better or worse? And I will say, after you left, so two things. I'm so glad that you told me that you left it with 20 minutes to go, even though I invited you to stay because of that very thing. You thought you didn't want to blow everything. Let's save some. I actually thought you didn't want to be with me, but now I'm glad that was the reason. No, I'm just kidding. Number two, after you left, people were saying they really appreciate how calm and how rational you are. And I took that as a compliment, not an insult that they were saying I'm spazzy and irrational. But I did say that's why we make such a good team. So I love that idea. Somi shows, I think it's her birthday. There we go. Another super chat. What a way to celebrate my birthday, but I'll forever be a Canucks. What do you mean, but? That means you think these trades are no good. It's John Shortell's birthday too. Okay, so two wonderful Canucks influencers. Somi shows, happy birthday. I've got to meet Somi before, which is awesome. And John Shorthouse. And the boys will be okay. What a great lead into our analysis of these two trades.
Yes, thank you very much. All right.
Yes.
Let's dive into it. So I think sort of our days have been established, right? You were at work trying not to get in trouble. I was at the gym. I finished my workout at 4 and I got in my car and I had a bunch of texts in a group chat. As I was driving home, like I had my phone was playing music, so I had it like mounted and I saw a bunch of notifications come in from my friends in a group chat talking about trades. And I'm like, okay, I immediately switch off my music, switch to 650. Hear what's going on. JT Miller's been traded. We don't know the return yet, so I'm driving home as fast as I can. Of course, we have the return for that JT Miller trade, and let me pull that up here. So the overall trade terms. JT Miller traded to the New York Rangers. He's in year 2 of a 7-year contract, so 5 more years after this at $8 million, full no move, right? But did waive to go to New York. Eric Brandstrom included in this deal also. 1-year contract, $900K. I imagine he's an RFA. He is an RFA next year. But frankly, he was good for us in the role that he needed to fill, but we probably weren't going to see him in the lineup on this team going forward, right? He got waived like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. We hardly knew the Eric Brandstrom. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then Jackson Dorrington, who seemingly no one had ever heard of going into today. Because everything on like Reddit and Twitter was all like, who? Like, I didn't know we had this guy. And frankly, he was a 6th round pick that hadn't progressed very much over the last couple of years. So from a value perspective in this trade, quite minimal.
Yep.
Coming back to the Canucks, effectively, again, for two minor leaguers and JT Miller, Filip Chytil, who's in year 2 of a 4-year contract, so about 2.5 years left of club control till he's a UFA at 27, at 4.4375. So about 4.5 million, somewhere in there.
Sure.
Victor Mancini, who we talked about earlier, a 22-year-old defenseman, 6'3", 230, I think he was.
Nice.
Good Italian name, and got, has played 40 something games for Hartford in the AHL, and has played 15 games in the big club for the Rangers. And most of what I've seen is he was pretty fine in those games, and maybe, has a ceiling of around a third pair defenseman. And then really a pretty big asset in this trade is that 2025 first round pick, which is the Rangers selection, top 13 protected. And the Rangers are 6th in the Metro Division. They're sitting outside of a playoff spot. And frankly, if this pick had been in the top 13 going forward, it would get deferred to next year. The overall consensus from what I was reading after we chatted earlier is that this isn't a good draft year, but 2026 is. And if the Rangers were to bottom out a bit this year and that Canucks pick were to go to next year, that pick would have quite a lot of value going forward.
Yes.
So Thomas Drance was quite vocal on Twitter saying like, hey, that's the biggest asset of this trade. And his quote was, top 13 protected with a decent shot of converting to a very strong 2026 draft class, way better than I thought they'd do, and more than they paid to acquire JT Miller back in 2019. So obviously 5.5, 6 years ago, they paid less than that. So overall, the Canucks have come out ahead, but that's sort of besides the fact. So that trade in a vacuum, as we sort of discussed, you lose a really good 2C/1C, frankly, a number 1 center. You get back a defenseman with, low potential in Mancini, right? Third pairish potential, maybe second pair one day if you're lucky. A low end 2C, high end 3C in Filip Chytil, and a first round pick that, as we assumed, is just going to be flipped, which it was. Going back just to this trade in a vacuum, frankly, I was quite okay with it, as we had been prepared to be underwhelmed for this return for JT Miller. After you had some time to process it throughout the evening until like the 5 hours between the two trades, where did you sort of settle on this JT trade?
Thank you for laying that out so well, Parker. So here's the thing. And I'm going to be, very honest. And I'm trying to not let the bias of what happened in the second trade. Cause you asked me, just looking at this first trade, I told all my friends, especially the ones that were quite upset by it, either they're JT Miller guys, or they simply think, as you said, the return was underwhelming, which we were set up for by Jim Rutherford. I believe that this trade was okay because of the theory of addition by subtraction. And when I say that, of course, we are not a better team when you trade away basically Miller for Chytil. Like that's the impact right now. Of course, we are not a better team on the ice, but you and I, the media as well, we are not in the locker room. We cannot say how big of an influence, how distracting of an influence JT Miller was. Maybe it was actually not much of an influence and it was all blown out of proportion. But just from the people I talked to, the stories I've heard, the things I witnessed with my own eyes, I do think that if this means Quinn Hughes is even more solid in his leadership, if this means that the leadership group, which includes Petey, is tighter, if this means that there's just a more loose, fun, camaraderie, all for one for all attitude among the team, then it truly is addition by subtraction. Your team is probably worse talent-wise, but you might actually be better and more as a team. So that's where I come out on it.
Yeah, and obviously we had heard over and over that this is a rift that could not be solved, right? Jim Rutherford made that very clear in that Globe and Mail interview earlier this week or late last week, to the point where, frankly, I was expecting very little. When we talk about this year, it makes the team worse, and that but I think the big thing we need to circle back on is that JT Miller contract, right?
Yeah.
Looking at this year, he's an $8 million player. And when this contract was signed, this is something we talked about on this very show, right? We said, this is a contract that in the first 3 or 4 years, you're getting pretty good value. And that's what the Canucks window is defined as anyways.
Yeah.
But when he is 35, 36, 37 years old, when this contract runs out, that $8 million might hurt. Now, that was before we got the cap estimates that came out today, which are huge increases in the salary cap, to the point where that $8 million isn't as big of a deal. But I still think when you get to those last few years of that contract, and based on the way JT's been playing this year, that contract's not going to be a net positive in the long run. To the point where I look at JT Miller for a team that is contending right now, and I say JT Miller's a great ad. But if you're using JT Miller as a core piece to put a window together, I don't think he has that much value, which is why the Rangers are kind of an interesting choice to me, especially considering they're out of a playoff spot. But they seem to, think that their window's sort of closing, with Zibanejad seemingly, regressing quite a bit, and a few of their guys getting older. So, they make that move. And for the Canucks, they get a 25-year-old center who has had concussion issues, yes, but... And we looked at his analytics earlier, right? Sort of around the 65th percentile out of centers, which is like a fine 2C. But what's really interesting, and obviously concussion issues last year that's derailed him quite a bit. I got a really interesting stat from Greg Wyshynski that he tweeted out earlier today. He said, quote, "Excited to see what Filip Chytil does with an expanded role. Since 2022-23, he's been second on the New York Rangers in points per 60 minutes at 5-on-5.
Well,
so for 60 minutes at 5-on-5, he's averaging over 2 points per 60 minutes, which is second on the roster. But he hasn't had that opportunity, that role, where in theory with the Canucks right now, he's sort of the de facto number 2 centerman, unless more moves get made. So, who knows? Maybe he excels in that expanded role, but there's also always that concussion history that's concerning when he's had 4 concussions in his 7 years at the NHL level, and missed. He came back from a concussion last year. I was reading a New York Post article earlier from last year, where essentially he came back, rejoined the team in practice in a non-contact jersey, and had to leave the practice and needed help off the ice with his concussion issues that resurfaced there. So it's a bit risky for the Canucks, right? Being a guy who has this concussion history, but there's a bit of upside there, right? A 25-year-old centerman who, might blossom into a pretty decent number 2C.
Yeah, I like that stat you just gave about on the Rangers, the second best points per 60 at evens. That's pretty good. And that's a talented team over there. It's interesting. I don't know where it was, but I've been joking around a lot about, can't wait to watch, Vancouver versus Rangers or Sweden versus USA. Dave mentions Horvat versus Miller in the same division, in the same, basically 45 minutes from each other. That's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Forgot about that actually.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be interesting.
Yeah. Question for you really quickly, because I was debating this with my hockey pool guys. Very similar to you. They play and they understand the game. We're not arguing. We're just debating this top 13 protected pick. And you know how they were talking about the Canucks and Rangers had a framework for a deal last week, but it fell apart when they couldn't agree on the conditions. You might remember hearing that. And the conditions likely, whether the salary retention and or this protection. If you're the Canucks or if you're the Rangers, take whatever side you want. Do you think the Rangers, let's say it was the protection of picks, is it advantageous to the Canucks or Rangers to protect more, like top 16 protected, top 20 protected, meaning that's good for the Canucks because, or it's bad. I'm trying to figure this out, because if the 2026 draft is better, do you want more picks protected 2025 or less? I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah, there's a critical mass, right?
Yeah.
I think, if you're the Rangers trading that pick away, top 6 or top 8 is probably where you'd want it to be. Because I'm thinking, unless they get the option, if it's between like 8 and 13, for example, then obviously the option's always better. But this draft class is known to be a weak one coming up.
I see. Right.
Where the 2026 one is supposed to be quite good. So in theory, if you're the Canucks, that you would want the Rangers to sort of bottom out this year, that pick to get protected, to roll over to 2026, and for that to be the one that becomes your pick, because in theory it's more valuable, especially if the Rangers bottom out again and then it's unprotected.
Correct.
And then you're suddenly in the lottery mix.
That makes sense. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So, all things being equal, you're right. You want the Rangers to use their picks this year because it's a weaker draft. That makes sense. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All in all, though, that becomes very irrelevant for this Canucks team. Again, maybe at the end when we're talking about the sort of holistic stuff, we can talk about, JT and the history.
Sure.
But looking ahead to this next trade is quite interesting. So the Canucks get rid of JT Miller, bring in a replacement, quite lower tier 2C, but add that first round pick that we said earlier today they're probably going to flip. I don't think either of us thought that flip would happen this quick.
No, not on the same day.
And it's funny, right? Because the Canucks traded, Horvat away on, in late January 2023. They get Lindholm late January of last year. They trade Miller late January this year. So they seem to have a bit of a pattern.
I'm booking work off on January 31st, 2026, just so you know. I'm going to book work off just to be ready. Yeah.
Probably a good idea. Yeah. So the Canucks, after tonight's game, which ended at, 7:30, 8 o'clock, which is why I was so confused by the trade, because I was like, oh, the game ended like 10 minutes ago, but that was just because I was watching the recording. So the Canucks go out, they take that first round pick from the Rangers and flip it.
Yeah.
They trade that away to the Pittsburgh Penguins, who have been struggling this year. So that first plus Vincent Desharnais, which frankly to me is a cap dump. 2 years, $2 million, and he can't even make the lineup currently. Danton Heinen, 2 years at $2.25 million. Frankly, I think that's also kind of close to a cap dump, because Heinen hasn't been super impressive, and frankly, he was pretty bad tonight. Had a lot of giveaways that led the other way. And Melvin Fernstrom, who is a Canucks draft pick. He was the Canucks third round pick in this most recent draft. Right winger who has 8 points in the Swedish Hockey League this year in 35 games.
Yeah.
In the long run, unlikely to be, at least a good enough NHL player that's not replacement value, right?
Yep.
That you couldn't just go get in free agency. So frankly, for the Canucks, it's a first round pick and some cap room and some depth guys.
Yep. That's fair.
In return, the Canucks get their third Pettersson, Marcus Pettersson, who has been linked to the Canucks for
all
months.
year.
Yeah. A long time.
Yeah.
Marcus Pettersson, who is in the 5th year of a 5-year contract. So UFA going into this season. So you have to be pretty confident you're getting an extension, or you're making a push for the cup this year. We'll talk about Marcus Pettersson shortly, and Drew O'Connor, who is in the 2nd year of a 2-year $925K deal and will also be a UFA, but likely won't really demand much of a raise going into next year if they want to keep him around.
Yeah.
So this is, in a vacuum, again, it's a big trade. It's a first round pick, 2 roster players, kind of one roster player, and he's kind of your number 8 D-man right now, because I think Elias Pettersson might have passed him. For Marcus Pettersson, who is a really good second pair defenseman, and Drew O'Connor, who's a decent third line left winger.
Yep.
In a vacuum, with the team where they're at right now, a little risky. But if they're thinking we're going to keep Marcus Pettersson around long term, it does a lot to your defensive depth.
Yeah. 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 I like it.
And we talked earlier, right? And we sort of said, hey, if you're getting rid of JT, which is a position of somewhat strength on your forward side. And we've known the Canucks defense is an issue, right? But if you go and you take that first round pick that you got for JT Miller and you use it immediately to, your second line gets a little worse in Chytil, but you improve your defense in with that first round pick by flipping it, suddenly the team's, I think, technically worse, but a lot more well-rounded, which I think is a big issue for this team, right? You look at the roster that they've been putting out, and the defense, especially if Hughes is hurt, which he didn't seem great, like he seemed injured tonight. But like you go Hughes and Myers, who has been very good, and Hronek, who's been fine. So you Hughes, Hronek, and then you sort of get into like the, Myers, who's been frankly quite good as your number 3/4. But Soucy struggled. Juleson has been, can I say bad? Because he hasn't been good. And Forbert and Desharnais, like really you had, in my opinion, 3 NHL like top 4 D men, and then you had that big hole on your second pair on the left side that Carson Soucy was filling.
Yep.
Marcus Pettersson slots perfectly into that position, where now you look at this defense and you say, oh, Hughes Hronek, good number 1 pair. Pettersson Myers, it's a pretty good number 2 pairing.
Yeah.
And your third pair becomes Soucy and insert whoever you want to insert, right? Whether that's Elias Pettersson, whether that's Noah Juleson, whether that's Forbert, he'd be on the wrong side. Pettersson would be on the wrong side as well. Elias Pettersson, God, there's so much specifying to do with the Petterssons, because we got 2 E's and an M. But now your defense starts to look okay. Your forwards look worse, but the defense looks okay.
Yeah. So I know our theory that we're trying to look at these 2 trades independently and then look holistically, as you said. It's pretty hard to do that though, because if you look at the trade, if you look at this trade individually, it looks bad because it looks like we're giving away a first rounder. You see what I mean?
Yep.
But I do like, if you take away that first rounder, which I'm not supposed to do, because then I'm taking Pettersson and O'Connor for Desharnais, Heinen, and Fernstrom all day because of exactly what you said. It's not just, it's salary. Okay, Danton Heinen, God bless him, good local kid. But I would argue that Carlson and Ratu and Sasson and probably this O'Connor guy are all going to do the same thing that he can do for half the price, right? For under $1 million. So that's the Heinen one. Desharnais, you're right, became a $2 million healthy scratch. He had a chance to improve. Then he had that horrible game against Edmonton where he took 3 or 4 penalties. And I just don't think that even Foote and Gonchar can save this guy, honestly. And I like him. He seems like a really nice guy. But I agree with you. And then you look at our top 4, no matter how you slice it. Hughes, Hronek, Soucy, Pettersson, or Hughes, Hronek, Myers, Pettersson, or Pettersson, Myers, or you go Hughes, Myers, Pettersson, Hronek, and they're almost kind of equal. Regardless, that is such a better top 4. It's actually 4 guys or 3.5 guys that should actually be in your top 4 as opposed to 2 or 2.5 guys in your top 4. It just is so much better. So you're right. Goaltenders we didn't touch. Forward we got a little bit weaker, but again, that addition by subtraction theory, and then defense. There's not one person who would say that our defense got worse today.
No, this is a really interesting. So here's sort of the in versus out, or out versus in. So the Canucks lose JT Miller, Danton Heinen, Vinny Desharnais, Eric Brandstrom, and Jackson Dorrington. Coming back, Filip Chytil, Marcus Pettersson, Mancini, and Drew O'Connor.
Yep.
Now, I'm going to ignore Desharnais, Brandstrom, Dorrington, Mancini, and O'Connor, because I think all of that sort of comes out in the wash, right? And I mean, you can even go, Heinen for O'Connor, 1-for-1, probably a wash, right? Yeah. So I think if you cross out Heinen and O'Connor, if we do sort of the like chemistry where you like cross off the
equal,
molecules that are the same, right?
You lost me at chemistry, but I hear you.
Heinen and O'Connor, the same. Desharnais, Brandstrom, Dorrington, Mancini, all sort of the same. right? And you sort of like really the big pieces that left the Canucks and came into the Canucks. Leaving the Canucks was JT Miller. Coming back was Filip Chytil and Marcus Pettersson. And if you just isolate that in the vacuum, because frankly, the rest of it is low enough stakes that it doesn't really matter. Because that first round pick came and went. We never have to worry about it. It was never a part of it. That was traded for Marcus Pettersson. Really, yeah, it's JT Miller for Filip Chytil and Marcus Pettersson. In a vacuum, probably not a fantastic trade, but with everything we know and with JT Miller having to be gone, the contracts make it a little iffy because Pettersson's a UFA. Assuming they extend Pettersson, JT Miller for Chytil and Pettersson, you're making your second line worse to make your second pairing good. I don't hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. And I'm not going to say, I know you're doing that for illustrative purposes. So that wasn't, you never oversimplify things in a non-thoughtful way. I agree with the way you did it. And you, even if we're saying like, well, maybe Heinen, Brandstrom, Desharnais together are a bit better than Mancini, O'Connor. I get that, but you're right. We're talking about impact players. We're talking about players that actually move the needle. You know, top two lines, top 2D pairs. You're right. It's and we get some cap space too, don't we? Or no?
Yeah,
Actually, I haven't added that up yet.
A good bit of it too, if I remember correctly. Let me pull up Puckpedia here.
Yeah.
So between the two trades, the Canucks saved $2.87 million on the cap this year. Okay. So the thing you also have to remember is, right, like the Canucks forwards got a little worse. Their defense is now fairly well rounded. Mm-hmm. If this team does well over the next week and then after the Four Nations leading up to the trade deadline, they also still have their own first. That's still something that can be moved. And, maybe you're using that to get a 2C or, who knows what they want to do with that. But they still have some flexibility to make something happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. And we don't always have our first round pick. That's why the draft was so boring for a couple of years in a row there.
Yeah, how often I saw a thing, it was like, when's the last time the Canucks have had 2 first round picks and a second in the same year?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we had 2 first
so long ago, right? You even think about like, oh, well, we traded Horvat, we got that first. We didn't have a second. The Canucks had a lot of draft capital for a moment there. But yeah, I mean, like Pittsburgh sort of bottoming out, and Pettersson is a pending UFA, right? It makes sense for them to move on from him if he wasn't in their long-term plans. And frankly, he should be in the Canucks' long-term plans, right? He's been quite a good defenseman. He's 6'5", 174 is what he's listed at, so he's quite thin. He's had 18 points this year in 47 games, had 30 and a full 82 last year. He was a plus 28 last year. Yeah. Let me find an analytics card on him, and I'll let you.
And while you do that, Josh Yohe, who's a writer, a very prominent writer for The Athletic, longtime Pittsburgh guy, has a great relationship with Jim Rutherford and any of the Pittsburgh current players and former management. And he did, it's funny, and there's no Canucks media to this, but he did a quick Q&A with Jim Rutherford right after the Marcus Pettersson trade was finalized. And Rutherford was gushing about Marcus Pettersson. He traded for him once in Pittsburgh. He actually traded Sprong out for Marcus Pettersson in. So that's kind of funny how both those guys sort of connected, but not really this year. But more importantly, Jim Rutherford was gushing about Marcus Pettersson, how he's a good in the dressing room, and he's not flashy, but he's everything you want. And as you said, Parker, a second pairing defenseman. I know you like him a lot. I was fine with him. I don't know him as much as maybe you might, but I certainly don't know him as much as Jim Rutherford does. And I think, and many people are talking about it in the chat, as they should, that this could be an off-season priority for this management group. And given Pettersson's history with Rutherford, I think we could see it get done. I'm not guaranteeing it, but you could see why the Canucks made this trade. Not only does it shore them up now, but Rutherford in that article, Parker, says this is a move made for long-term. So maybe he's very, very confident that they're going to sign him long-term.
Yeah, I'm just getting this pulled up here.
Sure. Sounds good.
And you can now see it. So this is Marcus Pettersson's analytics card. All right. A quote from Jay Fresh: Marcus Pettersson, acquired by Vancouver, is a top pairing defenseman. Solid puck mover, complementary presence, has improved offensively. Tall but not strong, gets hit constantly. Very good defensive stick, can swing the puck around the offensive zone. Looking at this analytics card, the current year, it's a bit tough to judge because Pittsburgh's frankly been terrible this year.
Yeah,
right. They're just not that good. But looking at wins above replacement percentile, 2022-23, that's got to be like 90th percentile.
Yeah.
23-24, 75th percentile, 24-25, 85th percentile, let's say. That falls on the graph. Projected 90th percentile wins above replacement. On the offensive side of the puck at even strength, 97th percentile. So he drives a lot of offense. Defensively, he struggled, right? 41st percentile is the expected, but obviously this year gets weighted quite a bit into that, right? You look at the last 2 years, he's around 70%, 80% those 2 years defensively. This year he's been closer to 10%. So, it's a bit tough to judge. That 10% drags that average down a lot. If the Canucks are getting, 2 years ago Marcus Pettersson or last year Marcus Pettersson, it's a heck of a hockey player. Very good on the penalty kill, right? 87th percentile on the PK. Not a great finisher. Who cares? He's a defenseman. Goals. Who cares? He's a defenseman. First assists. He's setting up plays. That's it's a good number you want. Penalties. He takes a little bit more than he draws. That's not ideal. But two key stats here, or at least one really key stat here. You look at the competition he plays against, right? He plays on that top pair in Pittsburgh. And he plays against the 80th percentile of competition in the NHL, and he plays quite well against them. I feel like you put this guy in a second pairing role, I think he's going to excel. I think putting him out there with Tyler Myers on the second pair, and you've got yourself a really solid, reliable second pair. And frankly, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking Hughes and Hronek, 24 minutes. Pettersson Myers, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You got 16 to kill, right? I think you can, maybe, you know what? Hey, 26-22. You got 12 minutes to kill, right?
You talk like it's 12 seconds, man. It's still 12 minutes. I'm just fucking.
Fair enough.
I'm just kidding.
But that's 12 minutes of Carson Soucy and ex-defenseman, and I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. This defense got a lot better today. The forward group got a good bit worse, and this trade really comes down to, can you extend Marcus Pettersson at a reasonable rate? Because if he's going to cost a lot of money, you might lose this trade in the long term. But look, the Canucks said, no, our window's not closing yet. They are making a push. They got that first round pick. They could have said, okay, we're going to do a bit of a retool. We're going to, trade a few guys this year, get some draft stock, flip that for guys next year, and turn ourselves into a contender next year. They said, no, we're going to go out and get a pending UFA who expires, who's a really good defenseman who we're probably going to have to pay, $5.5-6 million. And we're going to make a push. And whether we agree with it or not being a good decision, it's exciting.
Yeah. Trevor P agrees with you. Hughes, Hronek, Pettersson, Myers, Soucy, Forbert. Cup is ours. I love it, Trevor P. That's awesome.
You forgot the third Pettersson in there.
Oh, yeah. DP. Yeah, true. By the way, but I know we joked about this earlier, but if we can agree that Hughes, Hronek, Pettersson, Myers, and Soucy are our top 5D, you make a good point, because on our roster, really, it's only Juleson now with Desharnais as our only right shot D, unless you're bringing up Friedman or Cole McCord or something. On the left is where you're stacked. You're stacked relatively. Hughes, Pettersson, Soucy, and Forbert are all lefties, and there's DPD behind them too. So it's kind of like 5-3 right now in my eyes. Oh no, 5-4 if you include Friedman. My point is, do you put a righty in and it's Juleson by default right now, or do you do Soucy Forbert, because Forbert is a veteran and has shown that he can steadily play on the other side?
Yeah, and even from the beginning of the season, we said the defense, we've been talking like, hey, this team is good. Like the forward group's really good. and then you add a defenseman at the deadline, and the team becomes pretty good, right? Well, they've added the defenseman, and the team, like the defense, looks pretty good. In theory, now you're looking at it and being like, all right, now we just need a 2C. And if this team goes on a bit of a run, and frankly, if they play like they played tonight, I could see them going on a bit of a run. You pull that off, and then, if this team's comfortably in a playoff spot by the deadline, you trade that first, you get a 2C, and the roster starts to look pretty well rounded out, right? You've got Pettersson with DeBrusk and, let's say, Besser, right? Because Besser doesn't have Miller anymore. Besser's been Miller's right-hand man. That's gone now.
Yeah.
So you go Pettersson, DeBrusk, Miller, whoever your 2C is with Garland and Höglander, because, frankly, Niels Höglander tonight played like a top 6 winger. He played like Höglander of last year. Your third line then becomes Chytil and Joshua and whoever else you want. And then you've got your fourth line of like Suter, Bluger, and O'Connor. And that's a pretty good forward group, right? Yep. And then your defense is pretty good. And then your goaltending is really where it all falls, right? Is Demko back, or do you have to ride Lankinen? I think this management group got put in a really, really bad situation with this JT Miller thing, and they did the best they could with it. We've been told for the last 3 months that the return is going to be underwhelming. And frankly, they did okay with what they had in their hand.
Yeah. Yeah. 2 things I want to bring up too, and then I think we can go to the people for the last few minutes. Actually, I'm really good. I'm glad LC reminded me of Tom Verlander, whether it's next season or the season after. He's our third pairing guy on the right side behind. And then Myers, that'll be the end. Technically, 2 years from now, that'll be the end of Myers' 3 years. So that maybe by then Verlander jumps up to second pairing. So yeah, Hronek, Verlander, Myers, I have time for that for sure. Thanks for that reminder. Here's the other thing, Parker. I was listening to 650 when I was bombing home from dinner, trying to make 10 o'clock. And they were also talking about just cap ramifications. And they overwhelmingly believe that the 2025 free agent class is a lot weaker. It's just like the draft than the 2026 free agent class. And of course, this year it's Rantanen, Marner. They're going to be at the top of the list. Nick Ehlers, Besser, and there are a few others. But then they were saying that 2026 is way better. McDavid, maybe not him, but that there are a lot of really good players in 26. So again, there's so much that happened today with the news of the big increases in the salary cap, and then all the moves the Canucks made, which in essence are cap positive for them. Who knows? They might not be done, but they might not be done from a long-term setting up to succeed long-term as well. So even though they made 2 trades in one day, it's never dull being a Canucks fan.
Sure isn't. I want to talk about cap space.
Sure.
Right now, currently, the Canucks have about $6 million in cap space.
Okay.
By the trade deadline, if the Canucks make no other moves and get to the trade deadline with the current roster as is, they will have nearly, at least is what Puckpedia says, nearly $11 million in cap space at the deadline. $10.9 million in cap space, which essentially means you can go get whoever you want as long as they make under $11 million a year. You can't go get McDavid, but you can get most guys in the NHL. It's really interesting because, like that's something you can weaponize, right? You can make some additions to your team. You have to give to get, but maybe there's a cap dump level of player who fits into this team really well that they can go get, or maybe they trade that first that they have kicking around, or any of their other picks. Because frankly, if your roster, or if your window is the next few years of Quinn Hughes, you do whatever you can to maximize that.
Right.
This team's got some flexibility now.
Yep, they do. And that's why, even though 9 or 10 different players or 10 players assets moved today, I think we both agree that Rutherford is likely and Alvina aren't done, that this team could still look drastically different after the Four Nations, after the trade deadline, or definitely in the offseason, because we haven't even touched on the guys like Besser and Lankinen and Suter who are UFAs, or the guys that will need new contracts the year after, i.e. Demko. So what of this is such a fascinating time in terms of in terms of everything, but in terms of roster management for this team right now, and you can see that Rutherford and Alvin have started to move on their plan. Because you got to believe that their plan is to re-sign Marcus Pettersson, correct? It's got to be.
It would have to be. If you're just signing him, or if you're trading for him for just this year's window, with where this team's at, that seems very short-sighted. You have to imagine that the goal is to get an extension together.
Yep. I'm with you. Okay, so before we go to the people, now that we've talked about the 10 assets flipping, including the wash of the first round draft pick, we've done a pretty good job of saying we're worse at forward by a bit. We're much better at D. Goalies are washed, no change. We have some more salary cap space. We have the same number of draft picks because it was only 1-for-1 in and out. How do you think they did overall?
With the hand they were given, I think they did fairly well. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to find. Dom Lucian only posted the numbers earlier, but an interesting number from after the JT Miller trade. The Canucks playoff odds dropped from 79% to 71%. However, I imagine after trading essentially a first who isn't on your roster for Marcus Pettersson, they probably got most of that back.
You think so?
I would think. So I think they're in a decent spot. I have a really in-depth chart that I don't know if I want to share because it's complicated.
Well, tell you, if you put it up, I'm going to look at it intently and I'm going to pretend I know what's going on, and then you do whatever you want with it.
I like you pretending intently what's going on. That sounds good. Let me get that pulled up here.
I've been doing it for 4 years on the show, Parker.
All right, here you go.
He missed that, everyone. He missed that.
I hope you enjoy this.
All right, I'm ready.
It's too small anyway. I can zoom in. We can scroll. So this is all of Marcus Pettersson's analytics.
Oh yeah, easy.
This is all compared to league average. So anything in the positive is better than league average. And really, I mean, general offense, about league average. Passing, sure, league average. Everything's league average. Defensive zone retrievals and exits. Look at the blue on this graph. Defensive zone puck touches per 60, retrievals per 60, botch retrievals, which blue is still better than average. Like every single stat in gathering the puck in your defensive zone to move the puck up ice, he's in the blue. I'm just going to say that's great. I'm going to stop sharing before we look too deep into this because I also don't know what we're looking at. But Dom Lucian says kind of exactly what the Canucks needed on the back end. And that's what I like to hear.
Yep. So blue was good, orange was bad. That's what you're telling me.
Yes.
Then I'll take it. Okay. Good. Then that makes me happy.
Yeah, I think.
Do we wake up to another trade tomorrow, Parker?
Oh boy, I don't know if I can handle that. I got a busy day tomorrow. All right, we're at 10:56.
We should go to the people. Me and you, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to the people. We've got 300 people on YouTube, like 700 on Twitter. We got over 1,000 people in here right now. Get your questions in right.
A lot of people
now. I'm going to start. This isn't a question, but Adrian says we can spin the trades any way we want, but at the end of the day, all eyes will be on Elias Pettersson. Absolutely. Look, that was, and that's what we talked about, right? Forwards got worse, defense got better. The real question on does this make the team better is Elias Pettersson better for what just happened?
Yes.
If tonight is our only sample, he looked better. But who knows, right? I don't think this is going to take Pettersson from a 60 to 100 point player overnight, but maybe it does. And suddenly the Canucks are totally fine. That would be sweet.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree with all of that. And yeah, already, yeah, especially if he's not traded, because I think we're still we still don't know if he's going to be traded. But for now, he is the man. He's not wearing the C, but he is the guy who makes the most, and he's the guy that's supposed to benefit the most from Miller being gone. So, do you think this does anything at all to the Besser negotiations?
I think it makes it less likely he gets traded because it feels more like we're doing something this year style of move. I don't think he gets extended though. I think that's like you say, AFP was, we used it all off season. It was fairly close. 7 years at 9 mil per. I don't know if I can stomach that for Brock Besser. Now the big cap jumps, maybe that's not the worst, but I don't see him as a 9 mil guy. I see him as a 7 mil guy. 8 feels rich, 9 feels richer. Mainly because it's a bigger number. That's a tough one for me.
Yeah, I've always said that anything more than 4 years, I don't care what the number is. I'm not sure if I do it. He's not the fastest guy in his prime. So as he gets on the other side of 30 eventually, I don't like it. I like this question though. Does this take PD off the trade market? I don't know if it does. If they're looking to do a complete overhaul, I think it does, but I'm not willing to bet on it.
I think Pettersson is off the block, from like an NHL games term, right? He's off the trade block, but they're probably still listening. From my perspective, I think they want to give him a spin without JT Miller in the lineup, let him be the guy and see what that does. Yeah. If we have the last few games go, because frankly tonight he was good. If we go into the last few games of Four Nations and he remains to be, he looks like the best forward on the ice, then I think they say, okay, this is our guy. If they don't see a turnaround, and frankly, I don't know how much they can expect with his knee injury, then maybe they say, okay, we're going to look a different direction. But as of right now, they've just done quite a big overhaul, and they've got a month until the trade deadline. I think they probably want to get an idea of where this team now stands after all the moves they made today.
Yeah. I agree with that. Isaac asks, if EP40 is injured, do you trust Chytil as number one center? That's not very good. Yeah.
No, but you can ask this question about a lot of teams.
Yeah, fair.
There's a lot of teams that have a big drop off between their number one and number two. I think that's a fairly unfair question, right? If you're the Colorado Avalanche and Nathan McKinnon gets hurt, how good do you feel about Casey Middlestat being your number one center? Right. It's a big drop off. So I think it's a decent thought exercise, but every team has that problem. Not every team has the luxury of having two elite centers like the Canucks did the last couple of years.
Yeah, that we did until 6 hours ago. Edmund says, do you feel that Alvin will trade our remaining first round pick for 2025 to fix the 2C problem?
I want to see what Chytil does. Similar to what Wyshynski said, where Chytil's never had the shot of being a number two center, right? He's always been the number three, number four. But in his limited minutes, he's been quite good. So assuming he remains healthy, I think we'll see what the next month brings. If Filip Chytil looks good over the next month, and I think he'd have to look excellent, where it's like, oh, this guy could be a 65-point guy.
Yeah.
Okay, he's going to be our number 2C. Or if he shows up and he's struggling and he doesn't fit in with the group, then I think the Canucks start to say, okay, do we trade our first round pick to upgrade our 2C? Maybe we include Filip Chytil in that deal even, right? If we're talking about, because we already have Suter and Bluger as our 3 and 4, right? Yep. If we add another center, now things get weird and you have Suter and Bluger on a line together and it maybe doesn't work that well. So maybe he gets packaged because I think he has positive value. So I think they are just going to wait and see for a few weeks. Let the Four Nations go by. Let those few games come in before the deadline and see what this team actually is doing.
I mean, I'm kind of excited. Like, I actually haven't read anything. I don't know if there's any relationship or connection between the two checks, the two Phillips, right? In Hronek and Chytil. But at least there's another check on their roster who's prominent. Like that's I kind of like those kind of things. Maybe it makes no difference, but just something thought about. Alfred, no, PD and PD won't play as a pairing, given that they're both lefties.
Yeah.
They both play on the left side. Yeah, good question
That
though.
makes it tougher.
Yeah, it does. It does indeed. Oh man, there's so much going on, but I don't know if you want to jump. A lot of people talk about Besters.
I'm okay.
Okay. Let's see what else you got. A lot of talk about Besser, which is good. Can you give a quick 30-second on what you think of Mancini's potential?
Yeah, I like this guy as someone that you add. So some background: 5th round pick, 159th overall in 2022. He was picked. I think I said 17 picks before Jackson Dorrington, who we traded away.
Right.
While Dorrington has had quite a flat growth over the last couple of years, Mancini has been quite good. He's 6'3", 229. He's a big boy. 22 years old, played 3 years in college, didn't really have a big jump, but went to, at the end of his college career, finished off the season last year in the AHL in Hartford, had 3 points in 7 games, and was a part of their playoff run, playing 10 games in the postseason. This year, he's played 23 games in Hartford, has 10 points as a defenseman. But the big key is he got a call-up. He played 15 games for the Rangers this year, 5 points in those 15 games. And a lot of Rangers fans liked what they saw in Mancini and thought he could be, a decent third-pairing guy currently. Now, you got to imagine, especially as a 5th-round pick, you give him another year or two in the AHL, maybe he turns into, a decent third-pairing guy. Maybe he turns into, a Susie or a Juleson or a Forbert or something along those caliber. Now, not the most exciting thing in the world, but there's a bit of upside there, and it's positive value. It's a nice piece to add, but it's also probably a guy that you can find in free agency.
Sure. And let's end with this. A good question, non-trade related, but very relevant. Where are you guys with Demko? It's pretty concerning that he can no longer stay healthy. And do you think Lankinen will get extended? I will say, I didn't see the game, so I can't really comment fully. But I was really hoping for back-to-back. Demko hasn't strung back-to-back strong starts since his return, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I think Demko was fine in this game.
Yeah, okay.
But not fantastic. A couple of defensive mistakes that led to a couple of the goals. But then you look across the ice at Jake Ottinger, and he was fantastic, right? And that's what Demko's supposed to be.
Correct.
Demko is very, very good on Wednesday night. Like, very good. That was vintage Demko, let's say, which is something to say about a 29-year-old. But yeah, it's concerning. That injury that took, like, the no longer stay healthy is a bit tough, considering he missed 9 months and he's been healthy, and he had the backside. It's tough, right? When you're not playing pro hockey for 9 months and you jump back into it. I imagine that's quite hard on the body, and not many people can do that. So it's really tough to say from the outside. However, it does sound like they want to extend Lankinen. They do have one more year of Demko, right? I don't hate the idea of extending Lankinen and going into next year with both of them again and trying to split the load. But you got to imagine Lankinen's asking for something along the $3 or $4 million mark, and now suddenly you're paying your 2 goalies $9 million, and that's a bit tougher.
It's tougher, but with increased cap.
Right. But at that point, where do you want to spend your money? Right. Because once you get to the playoffs and the cap doesn't matter anymore, you're probably only playing your number one goalie in the postseason. Right. Most teams do. And that, let's say $4 million you're spending on Lankinen would probably be a really nice second line guy during the postseason. So it's a tough balancing act. I don't think you do anything with Demko now, right? I think you run the rest of the season out. You've got Lankinen, you've got Demko. You can do whatever you need to with the two of them. And then in the off season is when some sort of decision would have to be made.
And by the way, great point that you nailed the $4 million number, because Lankinen's potential contract being compared to Charlie Lindgren, who's about to sign a 3 or 4 year contract worth $3.5 to $4 million, and that's what a lot of people, a couple of people are saying is going to be a comparable. So yeah, there's your $4 million right there for Lankinen.
Yeah,
we'll see. So it's interesting now because of this show that we're doing on this Friday night instead of Monday. We'll still have our Monday show. We only have one game to predict now, Sunday.
yeah. I think what do we predict last episode?
You were actually I said 2-1 and you said 2-0-1. So we were both basically there.
Yeah, I mean, if they win on Sunday, you hit.
Oh yeah,
I don't.
Sorry, it didn't count. Yeah, we're not there yet. Yeah.
So you have to be 1-0, and I guess I also have to be 1-0. It's the Red Wings on Sunday, and there's some new guys in the lineup. I think that'll be a 5:00 game at home. Is kind of interesting.
Someone said they might not play because of their American visa situation, but can't they play because don't they play away games like here?
Well,
I don't get it.
Wasn't that me that said that at the beginning of the show?
No, but and then someone I think Fangirl also said she doesn't expect them in the lineup, but I do.
It's the team that you're working for that the visa matters. We see it quite often where a player gets traded from an American to a Canadian team, and even if the game's in the States, sometimes they can't get the visa situation sorted.
Okay.
I don't know how it works with like foreign players, like a guy like Chytil, where he's not from the States. Maybe it's different. Where they already have like a visa to work in the States, and maybe I don't know. No idea how it works.
Yeah, embassy might not even be open. No, I'm just kidding.
Who knows with everything? It's tough. But it would be nice to see everyone in the lineup for that game. It'd be nice to see where this team's at because 4 games before the break, and you want the Canucks to ideally win 3 of them and go into the break with a playoff position, and they come back and get right into the gauntlet.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's right. The 3 home games, right? Before they go.
Yep.
Before the end.
Oh,
yeah.
No, the Sharks are on the road in the middle of all of it.
Oh, that's right. That's a weird one. They go away for that one game and then they finish off against Toronto. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good to me. Well, Parker, that's I think we're both in the same boat. Underwhelmed a little bit, but that was not unexpected. Then when you look at the bigger picture, a step back, we can see that the team did improve on D, and maybe that's more important right now than the step back they took on offense. And we don't know. We don't know how Chytil's going to be. So I guess the glass half full still remains half full.
Yeah, I don't think this team's dead in the water yet. I think there's still some potential to make a push for the playoffs. And frankly, tonight's game, I think, was beneficial towards that. I think they looked like a good team against a good team. And you add in a Marcus Pettersson and a Filip Chytil to tonight's roster. As long as Quinn Hughes is healthy, maybe, you know what wouldn't be the worst? Maybe he's a little banged up, can't play 4 Nations, and is super healthy for when he comes back. Although I do want to see him in the 4 Nations. But I also want Canada to win, so it's a tough balance.
Well, we got 2 more weeks to figure that out, or a week to figure that out.
All right, folks, thank you all for joining. We have almost 1,100 people in here. If you enjoyed the show, you can rewind to any part if you missed any part of it. If you're here on YouTube, one of the 300 people, hit subscribe, hit like. Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're one of the 800 people on Twitter, follow Clay, follow myself, ParkersPucks, even though I don't tweet anymore, except I did once today. You can find us on YouTube, Canucks After Dark, youtube.com/Canucks After Dark. Subscribe, hit like I said before. Clay, before we wrap up, any parting words this Friday night?
I just want to thank everyone that's in the chat that decided to join us. And if you did double duty and joined us earlier on my show, the fact that you joined us for 2 hours of content, we wouldn't want to wish that on anyone. So thank you. It just shows how passionate you are about the team. We appreciate the support. Everyone who gave a super chat or membership message today, thank you as well. And Parker, never a dull moment. It's funny. It should be our mantra. Never a dull moment with this team. And we'll see what we get to talk about, what happens in the next 3 days before we talk again on Monday nights.
Absolutely. Folks, we'll be here Monday night, 10 p.m. And then probably not the following Monday, but we'll catch up and figure that out. Like I said, hit like, hit subscribe. This will be up on your favorite podcast platform in a matter of 10-15 minutes. So go follow over there if you're not as much of a video person. Other than that, have a good Friday. Have a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday.